questions, and we know that you guys will probably need to reach out. One thing we're really excited about is that at the last board meeting, the board raised the substitute pay considerably. It's on a temporary basis through the entire COVID-19 pandemic. And I think most of you know that the sub rate for many, many years had been extremely low, and we had plans to raise that. But with help from the CARES Act funds that we have, we now are really happy and proud, I guess, to be able to raise the daily sub rate to $175 a day. And I don't think you'll find that anywhere. Half day pay, $87.50. That's for 3 hours or more, and then $200 a day for long-term substituting. So with that said, welcome. And we hope by the end of the session here, you'll have most of your questions answered. If not, we're always here. And your main contact, as you know, will be Emily Weinsheimer, who is the substitute coordinator and the administrative assistant in the Human Resources Department. Oh, that's a great picture. Who put that up? So anyway, I was like 15 when I had that picture taken. But today, the agenda is going to be HR topics with Emily. Get it started. Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services, Sean Snyder, will speak about health and safety and all the things we have put into place and continue to put into place for everybody's safety and health safety. Subbing in special education classes, which obviously is a major component in our district. And Director of Special Education, Catherine Brown, will speak to that. And then Linda and Sinead will talk about the teacher handbook, arrival time, taking attendance, Google Classroom, Google Meets, Zoom, Clever, and other resources. So we have a pretty full agenda today. And again, I'd like to say welcome. And oh, here comes Emily. I better put my mask on. And Emily Weinsheimer, I'm going to turn it over to her, and she will speak to you guys about HR topics. So if I can do anything for any of you guys, give me a call. And thank you again. Here's Emily.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I took Phyllis's place at the end of August. I'm just going to briefly go over there's 9 mandatory trainings now, which all of you should have done when you were initially hired. It's changing a little bit this year for COVID-19. So you can go to getsafetytrain.com, sign in if you already have an account. If not, you can create an account. The new mandatory trainings, of course, are bloodborne pathogens, bullying, heat illness prevention, injury and illness prevention, child abuse, sexual harassment, and then the new one for this year is COVID-19. I'll send out an email with all of this information as well as the link to log in, and there it is. That's what the page will look like when you first log in. If you could all do that for us as soon as possible to get you guys back in the classroom, we'd really appreciate it. And Linda and Sinead, that's all I have.
Hey, and Emily, while you're there, I was emailing with Kelly Fowler, and I don't know if everyone knows, I think I put it in the first email, but you get paid a half day's pay for doing this training. Our training is slated to run from 2 o'clock until 5. We'll probably won't go till 5, probably more like 3:34. And then you have time to go over all of these links that we have in the agenda and that we'll be sharing out on this slide deck with you. So you get a half day's pay, which is at our new high rate that Dave was talking about, which is $87.50. So Emily, how do they go about doing that? Is that through ASAP?
Or they could fill out a timesheet. Yeah.
Okay. We're thinking the best way for that is a timesheet. The only issue is getting them the timesheet. Should I just have them email?
Yeah, we could email the timesheet.
Okay, if you want to just email me and let me know that you were here, I'll fill out that timesheet for you. And when it comes to signing it, I'll just say you were unavailable for signature. But we'll make sure that gets down to payroll this month.
Thank you.
All right, so next we have our boss, our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, Sean Snyder, who is going to share with you the updates to health and safety protocols as a result of COVID-19.
All right, thank you, Sinead and Linda, and welcome substitute teachers and potential substitutes. We're really excited to have you here today and have you interested in helping us out if we have some teacher vacancies throughout the rest of this year and moving forward. I just want to echo something Sinead and Linda said. This is a training that I know Linda in particular, had been working on the second half of last school year and really excited about this robust training for our substitute teachers. And then COVID hit and things kind of, this obviously is a much different training than any of us had in mind back when we were developing this, but you can expect a higher level of support and expect a training like this every year. And we just really want to make sure we do everything possible to meet the needs that you have so that you can help us when teachers are out. So thank you for that. So I'll have you go ahead to the next slide. I'm going to talk just a little bit about health and safety, and this is not what I would normally talk about in a substitute teacher training because those types of things under normal circumstances just kind of happen. However, as we know with COVID-19, this is probably one of the largest topics that people have either concerns about or just want to make sure they're doing the right thing. So I'll go over the general pieces to this. So first and foremost, we expect all students and employees to do what's called a passive screening before you come to school each morning. That's really just a self-check of symptoms. Do you have a fever? Do you have a bad cough? Are you having symptoms of a cold or, possibly COVID-19? And if you are having any symptoms, we don't want you to come. So that's called passive screening. Then also when you arrive at the school site, there is what's called the active screening. So every staff member and student has to have their temperature taken. For you reporting as a substitute, you'll go to the office and the office person will take your temperature, record it. They'll do a quick question for you, how are you feeling? Do you have any of the symptoms? If no, and if everything checks out okay, then you proceed to your classroom. So that's the very first step, both before you head to school as well as first thing when you arrive there. Some of the protective measures that we're taking are frequent disinfecting, so multiple times throughout the day. Classrooms, high contact areas, doorknobs, things like that will be disinfected. We're also, frequent hand washing and hand sanitizer before students enter campus, where there'll be hand sanitizer or hand washing stations at all entry points. Every classroom will have hand sanitizer. Either I saw some of them yesterday mounted right outside the door, which is great. The students, as they're coming in, can put the hand sanitizer on. If not there, then right inside the classroom. If they have sinks, we encourage that frequent hand washing, which is the ideal way to do it. Face coverings, those are required for all students in grades 3 and up. This is based on California Department of Public Health. Grades TK through 2, they're strongly encouraged but not required. And grades 3 and up, they are required for all staff members and all students in those circumstances. The 6-foot distancing requirement, we are trying to keep students separated 6 feet apart to the greatest extent practicable. You'll hear that term used quite a bit. Now that just means, if there's 5 feet 10 inches or 5 feet 8 inches in a classroom, that's okay. It's not quite 6 feet, but that's as practicable for that classroom. So the goal is to have 6 feet between staff and students and have our students as far apart as possible, as close to 6 feet as possible. Ventilation's important. We're being encouraged to have windows and doors open when the weather's nice and it's okay to do so. Just better airflow helps with the droplets and the virus, prevents it from being transmitted or shared. And then ventilation, our HVAC units, we've ordered the MERV 13 air filters. You may not even be familiar with those, but that is what's recommended by CDPH for protection. So those have been ordered and will be installed before November 16th when we come back in the hybrid model. And then respiratory hygiene is the final protective measure. And that we've been doing this for a while, sneezing or coughing into your elbow, teaching students those respiratory hygiene practices. If you use a tissue, put it in the trash can immediately. A lot of basic things like that, but they're obviously more important now when we have a virus that is transmitted through those types of things. So lots of protective measures. None of those on their own is the end all be all, but the more of those that we can do together in conjunction with each other, the better off we'll all be. So those are all of the things that we are putting into place to help keep you as well as our students safe while on campus. Okay, next slide. I think I'll go a little bit and then we can do a few questions. I'm sure there's some burning questions already, but this is really back to that passive screening and active screening. These are the symptoms. You've probably seen these. I don't think you could have avoided seeing these if you've looked at any type of TV or news broadcast since March, but these are the things that we don't want people to be in school if they are exhibiting. Now, the big real concern here, or the challenge, is that we're just entering cold and flu season, right? And so, you know, if you look at sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea, vomiting, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, we have to send students and staff home. You know, we cannot assume, oh, it's just a cold, or, you know, if you have a runny nose, we cannot take a chance on whether or not it is COVID-19 or whether it's a cold. So that's going to be a challenge as we enter, you know, into reopening during cold and flu season, and it will result in more people than usual needing to stay home or be home. Let's go to the next slide quickly. Okay, we talked about these, the preventative measures, safety measures, but let's go back to those. I'm sorry, you can go back to that slide before. Even though we talked about them, it's good to reiterate. Yeah, we did cover all of those: hand washing, hand sanitizer, face mask, respiratory hygiene, 6 feet apart, disinfecting and cleaning, and ventilation. There's a difference. It's probably good to call this out. There's a difference between disinfecting and cleaning. Disinfecting will happen regularly throughout the school day and does not involve, I mean, honestly, disinfecting doesn't always even involve wiping the surface off. Many disinfectants are intended to be sprayed upon a surface and left to dry on their own, and the disinfecting happens as they dry. I know the one that is sanctioned for use by our district is that type. I mean, some people may wipe them off, but honestly, that's just disinfecting. Then cleaning will happen after school hours when students are not present, you know, from our maintenance and custodian staff. So that happens at night or in the morning before school starts, and then some deep cleaning on Wednesdays. So it is important to call out that distinction between cleaning and disinfecting. Okay, next slide. Compliance with safety measures. These as a substitute, you know, sometimes you get tested by students in ways that maybe the regular teacher would not. So what about students who don't wear their masks appropriately, or they just refuse to wear them? What about students who are intentionally, you know, not staying 6 feet apart and just blatant disregard for all of those rules? So it's a progressive disciplinary process, like many of our things. The first thing for you to do would be to remind them or ask them to follow the rules. You know, you are required to wear a mask. You need to have it over your nose and, you know, over your whole mouth, things like that. If there are repeated offenses, you always still have the school administrator at your disposal, or, you know, you could talk to them again and really impress upon them the importance of it. This is serious enough, though, where students who are repeatedly not following these safety measures are supposed to be excluded from attending the in-person instruction, and they are assigned to full-time distance learning. So that is something for you to know. Like, you can tell a student, hey, you know, if you don't wear your mask the right way, or if you can't stay 6 feet apart, you're going to have to be assigned to distance learning. You won't be able to come anymore and see your friends here at campus. Those are all good things, I think, leverage points for you to just use as you're talking to students who might not be doing that. And of course, there's a difference between blatant disregard and just accidental. You know, there's a difference between a student who runs up and jumps on someone's back and, hey, buddy, how's it going? As opposed to someone who accidentally is, you know, maybe 3.5 feet as opposed to 6 feet. So each situation will be different. And there's certainly a difference between blatant disregard and some of those accidental things. So just good to talk about this and kind of have a bearing for you on what you might expect. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that's my little section on health and safety. That was brief, but a kind of a general overview. So I guess maybe this is a good time for some questions and answers on that specific part. Let's talk about that, and then I have something about email accounts to talk to you about. So don't let me forget to do that. New restroom procedures, yeah, that's a good one. We want to limit the number of students using the restroom at one time. There was a misconception out there a little while back that a restroom had to be cleaned every single time a student used it, and that is not accurate. The guidance from California Department of Public Health says regularly, or as frequently. I think it says frequently. Student restrooms should be disinfected frequently. The thing we really need to impress upon our students is proper hygiene. After you use the bathroom, you wash your hands, you get your paper towel out, and then you grab it and dry your hands and use that to open the door to prevent, the sharing of germs. So it's a lot of those things that we probably do as adults when we use public restrooms and things like that, teaching our students those preventative measures as well. So they will be disinfected, on a regular schedule throughout the school day, just not between each student. So we just want to limit the number of students going at one time. In this case, it's probably better to allow one student at a time to leave during class to use the bathroom, because it used to be all kids go to the bathroom at recess. Well, now we don't want 20 kids in the bathroom at recess. It's probably better if one at a time leaves class to go use the restroom if that's what they need to do. So that's a good question. Guest teachers to handle a situation where a student continues to not listen. That's really where you would lean on the site administrator, the principal or the vice principal. If it's bad enough, you could call the office and say, I have a student who's really blatantly disregarding this. If it's not bad enough, you could wait till the end of class and go talk to them and just give them that student's name. So really utilize the campus supervisor, the principal, the vice principal, things like that. So that would be how I would encourage you to handle those. Yeah, there is the risk if you allow one student to go from your class. There's 15 other classrooms that have allowed students to go to the bathroom as well. I think that's just part of building a culture of, it could happen where multiple students arrive at the bathroom at the same time. We don't have a system in place where teachers are communicating and, do you have a student out to the bathroom? So it's probably part of teaching our students, hey, if you walk in and there's already 2 students in there and, the stalls of the urinals are full, then you stand on the 6-foot marker tape until one student leaves and then the next student goes in. Inevitably, these types of things are going to come up, and it's really our responsibility to do everything we can to prevent that. But there will be things like that may happen, and hoping that our students understand health and safety practices and that we've taught them the 6-foot thing and how to disinfect or wash their hands is probably the biggest piece there. Other questions, you can type it into the chat box. I will let you know, typically substitute teachers have not been assigned logins for district access to district technology. And obviously that's kind of a problem right now, given that most everything we're doing either will still involve technology, even when we're back in hybrid, or right now with distance learning, you have to have access. So we are in the process of ensuring that every substitute teacher does have an account to be able to log into our district devices, have an email, have access to Google Classrooms, have access to shared docs that teachers are using. And Linda and Sinead will go into that in much greater detail with you after we're finished with our little pieces here. But just know that that is in the works, and many of them might already be created. And I think they might have a part on this agenda where they'll ask you to go and log in or try to log in. It may or may not be there, but if not, it will happen very soon. So just know that it's coming. Okay, it looks like at this point there's not a lot of other questions on the health and safety. I will encourage you to visit our district website, and we've got a ton of resources up there around the health and safety and just around COVID-19 in general. If you go to the home page of the website and it's under, I believe it's the Families tab, it's called Coronavirus Resources. So it is under, go to the home page. Yeah, it's under Family Resources and then Coronavirus Updates, it's called. Our full health and safety plan during COVID-19 for a safe return to school is a 30-page document. It's pretty large font, so don't be scared by the number of pages. It has every detail about every piece to health and safety that you might want to read further about, or if you have additional questions, I would recommend reading that before you come for your first day of substitute teaching. Also on that page are linked the official California Department of Public Health recommendations and guidance. Our safety plan is based on that. It's kind of paraphrased in certain places, and we pulled the most important pieces, but we also have linked that California Department of Public Health guidance in case you're curious just exactly what that says. So there are some great resources there that I would encourage you to check out as well during your free time. So with that said, I think I will turn it over to Catherine Brown. And once again, thank you for being willing to help support us with substitute teaching during these current circumstances.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am Catherine Brown. I am the Director of Special Education, and I am also the SELPA Director for Amador County. And echo and ditto what Sean had said about we're so very excited to have you all here and for your willingness to help support our students. I'll just go over a couple of things and then I will provide my email information in case you have additional questions about special education and supporting our students in the classroom. So first and foremost is I want to say that you need to take a deep breath. You need to take many, many deep breaths as you are teaching all of our students in Amador, and wear comfortable shoes if you're actually at our sites, because you're going to be moving around and it's going to help with classroom management, which I believe we're talking a little bit more later on. But just the key to special education students is that you are following the 3 P's of education, which is pause, proximity, and praise. So you're going to pause sometimes if you see somebody not necessarily doing what they need to do. You're going to use proximity within your 6 feet and all that good stuff. And then you're going to praise kids, and you will be successful. Our students will have IEPs, which are individualized education program plans. And these are plans that help that student be supported and be successful in the classroom. So when you enter a classroom, you should find a subfolder or binder. And within that folder or binder, you should find information on any students who might be your special education students. You want to be aware of this so you can offer them the appropriate accommodations and supports without calling them out. They are able and willing to learn, and you will not be able to identify them when you walk in the room. And so you just want to make sure that you have some sort of idea of which kids those are and which types of supports they need. I would also suggest that you reach out to the resources on site. So reach out to that administrator, or if you are able to speak with the teacher whose class you are covering, you can most definitely get more information from them. And I was speaking with some personnel at Amador High School this afternoon, and I asked them, I said, well, what would you tell teachers coming on board? And they said, roll with the punches. Enjoy yourself. You're going to get through the lessons as best you can. Sometimes we know things happen and you're not going to be able to necessarily do that, but make it educational and keep kids safe. Our students follow the same curriculum that other students follow. So there shouldn't be a need for you to have additional curriculum for those students. And like I said, I will share my information with you. If you have more questions or would like to get some more input about a class that you might be taking over for special ed, I'm here to help. So let me look at the questions here real quick. Does anybody have any questions other than what's already here? I need one of those binders for my brief long-term position. Okay, so Deborah, I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna put my information in. You can also, you can see me online, and shoot me an email, and we can talk about the class that you're covering and any supports that you might need. The key here is that I encourage you to teach and cover in our special education courses and classes. Most of our students are general education students who have support in special education, so they are in the general education classroom all the time. Are students with disabilities all going to be on campus, or will they follow the hybrid model as well? Good question. So right now, with our at-risk students coming on board, not all of our special ed students are on campuses yet. We have invited our students to sign up for hybrid or distance learning, and we are working through that right now. It is not all of our students, so not all of our special ed students will be on campus. Now, having said that, the caveat to that would be that our students that are covered by the Mod Severe program, our county students, they are all on campus starting yesterday. They started back earlier than our mild mod kids, so they are actually already on campus. If special ed students have medical releases to not wear masks, will we know that ahead of time? Yes, you will. Not only will you know that, but I'm hoping to, that will be part of the binders that we will be encouraging all of our teachers to create for all of you, so you know who those students are. And so the way that that works, if they do have a medical release for that, then they will have this sounds terrible, but they will have a special seat. They will be closer to a window, farther from other students. So we're having at least that 6 feet of distance from them, and we'll probably have some sort of plexiglass that is in front of them to help them keep themselves safe and to help keep you and the other students safe.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment on that related to the health and safety. So sometimes a doctor will say the student shouldn't wear a mask or a face covering, but then so the next thing we go to is a face shield with a drape, right? Like if you can't wear a mask, you can probably wear a face shield with a drape. So just because it says no mask doesn't mean they just come in with nothing at all. We go through the different steps if we receive a doctor's note like that. So if a mask or a face shield with a drape are not possible, then we would go to what Catherine described of, and this is straight from California Department of Public Health, seat them near a window if possible that could be cracked for increased ventilation. Make sure they're at least 6 feet from the other students, and possibly having plexiglass barriers around that desk if they just can't wear it, because we do need to take the protective measures, and in certain cases the mask is not appropriate. So
yep. And then we have a question, what do we do in the event that there is no binder provided? So I will be working with Sean and Linda and Sinead, and we will be making sure that those binders are in the classroom with that information, so you have that ahead of time. Any other questions for me?
I mean, we all know there have been days when you walk in, though, and it was a last minute thing and the teacher didn't have time to prepare plans, and maybe they were a teacher who didn't have a binder, and that's really where you guys really earn that. I mean, it's like, okay, what do I do now? And, you reach out to the teacher next door, you find someone else at a grade level, you go talk to the principal, and just really, it's problem solving at that point and troubleshooting, and hopefully maybe at some point the teacher could get something to you, but that stuff will happen just like it does under normal circumstances, and we just problem solve the best we can.
And also, most of our special education classrooms do have an instructional aide in the classroom who will be aware of the routines and the practices and the students. So that is someone that you can also lean on as far as supports. I kind of coach my subs, especially for the little, that you maybe have a favorite book or two that you bring with you. Probably have a bag of tools and tricks that you bring with you in case that situation happens where that teacher just I don't have a lesson plan, boom, I'm there to teach. And you know what? That's okay. If that does happen, then there are lots of educational games and things that you can do. If you need some ideas, I would be more than happy to share what I have. I have my own toolbox. I taught for 15 years, so we will make sure that you have what you need to be successful. So if there aren't any other questions, thank you all so very, very much, and I hope to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, let's see. No aides at the junior high or high school, Catherine, was a question.
So yes, they do have aides, instructional aides. They are assigned both classes at junior high are doing our co-teaching, but our administrators are really good about trying to assist you in the classroom, and if an instructional aid is needed, I'm sure that they would be willing to reassign for a while and to get you started. But we have aides at every site.
Thank you, Catherine. Mm-hmm. All right. And thank you, Sean, Catherine, Dave. So we're going to get on now with the kind of nitty gritty. So when Sinead and I looked at this, we call it Guest Teaching 101. And here's a quote from Mark Twain. It usually takes me 2 or 3 days to prepare an impromptu speech. And we kind of thought that's kind of how it's going to take a lot more than walking in 30 minutes before the day to prepare for distance learning or hybrid learning when you're a guest teacher. It's a whole new ball game. So Sinead and I are going to really go into the nitty gritty today for you of what's new and different in subbing. I'm going to walk you through our guest teacher handbook in just a moment, and that's more of a traditional handbook. I put this together last year before COVID hit. So this is more of a kind of a guide for guest teachers in our normal world, which we hope to return to soon. And then we're going to move into what's different now. And we're going to go through Google Classroom for you, how to run a Google Meet, how to run a Zoom meeting, how to take attendance if you are a distance learning teacher. So I know we practiced this morning and we went a little fast. And I know that all of you have different comfort levels in terms of technology. So just know that if we are going quickly today, especially through Google Classroom, and you feel a little nervous, know that Sinead and I are here to help you at any time. You can drop us a quick email or call, and we can meet with you and go through and address any concerns and explain things further.
Right. And at any point, unmute yourself and say, slow the heck down. That's okay with us too.
Yeah, because we know we have a lot now to go through, and I'm sure you're going to have questions. So we are monitoring the chat box, and we'll try to address those questions as they come up. So I wanted to look at, you hopefully all received the agenda, and I hyperlinked everything. Sean spoke about the health and safety plan, so that's listed in the agenda. You can just click on it and read through it. But we're on number 5 now, which is the guest teacher handbook, which is also linked. And Emily in Dave's office in Human Resources said she's going to make some hard copies available in case you want to have a copy of this handbook. You're more than welcome to just print it out yourself. But let's just go through and look at it a little bit. Remember, this was put together for guest teaching in our normal non-COVID environment. So not everything is in here COVID.
It was pre-March 2019.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and scroll through there. the first part, you'll see your table of contents. I'm going to go ahead and scroll, Sinead. So this just is your welcome. So you have an important job as a guest teacher. You go into classrooms that are without a teacher and keep students learning on track. What's more, you help students through tough transitions that can come from school staffing issues, and you serve the schools that need the most help. So we hope that you find this helpful. And if you have ideas of other things that we could add to it, we're very open to that also. So the first section is on frontline ASAP, for how do you get a guest teaching job? How do you log on? So we have the frontline phone instructions. It'll go through that. If you don't know your username and password, then please let Emily in Human Resources know, and she will get you directions for ASAP. And we also have the online instructions there where you're going to log on to ASAP Online. And that will take you, so I'm not going to go through it all, but if you go through, I think if you're already a sub, you're probably familiar with that system, but go ahead and take a look at it if it is new to you. I've tried to make it as step-by-step as possible. So then we're going to move into just the general duties of a sub. What is your responsibility as a guest teacher in our district? And the first thing that it says is arrive at least 30 minutes early. So later on in this, you'll see that we have the times for all the sites. What we're recommending during this period of distance learning and hybrid learning is that you really try to arrive 45 minutes to an hour earlier. So at an elementary school, typically your time would be 7:45 to 3:15, with the students leaving at 2:15. So I know when I was in the classroom, most subs left a little early, around 2:30, 2:45. So we would say, plan on getting to school earlier, and then maybe you could leave a little earlier so that you stay within your time frame. But it really is going to take 45 minutes to an hour, and you'll see why when we go into Google Classroom. Because once you get to school, first thing you want to do is sign in at the office, get your keys, get attendance instructions, and get their health and safety site instructions, because every site is a little different in where the students will enter, where they'll exit, where they have lunch, where they have their recess, what their recess looks like, directions for going up and down hallways. So every site is going to be a little bit different, and you'll want to just have time to kind of get all of that. In addition, as Sean mentioned, they're going to have temperature checks. You'll have your passive and active screening, and you want to be aware of what is your role in all of that. So that part's important to come early, get all of that information from the school office. And then once you get to the classroom, in the time before COVID, you would just look for your sub plan or an emergency sub plan. Pretty much now you're going to be going into the teacher's Google Classroom. And as Sean mentioned, most of you do have a district email, but some of you don't. And so we're working quickly to make sure that in the next day or so, everyone has a district email. And what we're going to be asking teachers to do is, when they know that they need a sub and request a sub, that as soon as they're given your name, they add you as a guest teacher in their Google Classroom. And that way you can sign into Google Classroom as them, go over what the plans are for the day. And that's when you'll kind of need to practice all the technology, how to use the Chromebooks, how to use the document camera, all of that. So that's kind of your before school. And then, of course, before class begins, you want to meet your buddy teacher, make sure that you can log into everything, know the seating charts, know where the telephone is, know the emergency procedures, where the bathrooms are, all of that. So let's go ahead and scroll. And then let's get to teaching duties. So these are teaching duties before COVID, but you want to make sure that you go through any plans that the teacher leaves for you. Sinead's been working and has made a wonderful template for teachers, a fillable. So as we have a handbook for you, we're also creating a handbook for teachers. And the teachers are going to have to fill in, their Google Classroom, their Zoom links, their Google Meet links, all the things that you need to know in directions for using that technology. So you want to go through all of that before class begins. And then when class starts, if you are the distance learning teacher, you'll be logging on to Google Classroom and doing your class virtually. So I do want to take a moment to mention that for both, if you're guest teaching in a distance learning class or a hybrid, either way, you're going to be going to the school site. So you won't be teaching from home, being that distance learning teacher, because you will need access to all of the technology at the school site. So that's why you want to check in, and they will have a room for you to work from. So during class, if you are in a hybrid, it'll be just the same. Make sure that you have that seating chart so you know where the children are seated, and encourage them to, maintain their 6 feet distance, wash their hands, follow the safety protocols. Let's go on, and I'll let you read through this document. I don't want to get into the weeds because it's kind of long. I just wanted to highlight a few of the things that you need to do. Let's go to the next page and scroll up. So this is a little checklist. Again, it's a pre-COVID checklist, but I included it so I thought it might be helpful for you to print out and take with you to a school site, just so you can, I like to always have my clipboard check off, make sure I have everything that I need. So just a checklist, sign in, get your keys, know what you're going to be doing, what the bell schedule is, know where all of the technology is, the lesson plans are. So it kind of just goes through there, a little checklist. Okay. And then this is the big one for many of us. I see a lot of familiar names on this. So I know a lot of you are subs that have been working for us for a long time and do a wonderful job with classroom management and discipline. But we do have a few brand newbies who are new to guest teaching. And I think classroom management and discipline is the scariest thing. And I loved what Catherine said about the 3 Ps. And that's what you need to do, is just take a breath, pause, praise, and make sure that you're, as much as you can, circulating around the classroom, still maintaining distance.
And we have bought some resources in the past year that are basically how-tos specifically designed for subs around classroom management. So if you're interested in checking one of those out from us, we have a few books in our office we're happy to lend out to anybody who's interested in learning some more tips and tricks for managing when you're the guest teacher, which really is 1,000 times harder than managing when you're the teacher of record. So you guys definitely do have the hardest job, right up there with bus drivers.
It's amazing. Last year, so I've taught for over 30 years. I've taught every grade in elementary. And last year they asked me to go walk up from our district office up to Jackson Junior High and take a junior high class. It was the hardest 80 minutes of my life. It's a whole different ball game than what, I'm great around second graders, but those 8th graders were going to kill me. So classroom management is tough. You just have to go in there with confidence. And I think the key, like Catherine said, is to be positive, to not rush things. And then, right away, you want to greet the kids with a smile and let them know your expectations. And let them know you're going to follow the teacher's discipline plan. You're going to, maintain, you're going to have a good day, preview the things that you're going to be doing, and just stay consistent, stay calm. Because a lot of times they will try to test you. So self-control is really, really important. Staying calm and staying positive. So we have there, praise the students, circulate as much as possible. A really good key is to find a teaching pal. So make sure that you've introduced yourself to the teacher on either side, and or a teacher who's teaching the same grade span or same subject matter, so that if you have questions, you can go to them, or if you need help. And then don't hesitate, especially during this time of COVID, when we're trying to have the kids maintain their social distance, control is going to be very important. So if you need to get the administrator in there to help you, don't feel like a failure. Feel free to call them and say, I need a little help, and they'll be happy to help you, because we want to keep everyone safe during this time. Another thing I want to go through, so we know we want to be positive. Always follow the teacher's sub-plans. It's important to have your bag of tricks, which we'll get to, but you certainly want to be able to, the most important thing is to follow the teacher's plans, get to what they would like to be taught, because we want to keep that consistency for the students. This year, more than ever, our learning time and teaching time is just so precious. We just don't want to waste a moment. We only have a short amount of time to really get in, the most bang for our buck in terms of English language arts and math, science, and social studies. So we want to make sure that you follow the teacher's lessons plans to the best of your ability. And then I want to go through some of the kind of, so we have a classroom resources document, and this is where, like Catherine spoke, have your little just in case supplies. You might want to have the kids make little name tags. You might want to have special books or a fun little project in case you do have that filler time, writing a poem, something like that. So you still want to have your little bag of goodies with you, but we just want to encourage always to maintain the consistency of the teacher's sub-plans. Okay. And then, of course, we have some of the do nots. We don't want anyone to get into any liability or a way to avoid negligence. So never, we ask that you don't use your cell phone while you're out there with the students and supervising students. Never place a student outside or somewhere where they're not seen. Don't keep students after school or after the bell. Don't use the district technology for your personal use. Please don't be on Facebook or doing any kind of social networking while you're at school. Obviously, never touch a student or their belongings. But this one is really important. Just don't make such a big deal out of a minor problem. It goes back to what Catherine said, just to pause, stay positive, take a breath. I know that it can be difficult. Just, kind of take a moment and breathe. Of course, don't let students have access to the teacher's grade book. Don't embarrass a student. And especially now with COVID, don't let them be wandering around the school. We we want to make sure we know where they are and that we manage who's going out at any time. So avoiding negligence has those same big ones. Don't leave the students unattended. Of course, never use corporal punishment. But number 4 is really important. Never give medicine, including aspirin or cough drops, to students. That's always been a rule. You would send them to the office, but now more than ever, as Sean mentioned with COVID, if sometimes we all know the child has a slight fever, they'll pump them with a little children's Tylenol or Advil before school, and then boy, that fever's there. If there is sniffles, coughing, runny nose, fever, sore throat, anything, send them to the office immediately. All right. And then I just wanted to touch upon some emergency procedures. If you haven't subbed, you can scroll up a little bit If you haven't subbed in our district before, this is kind of a wonky thing, but with our phone system everywhere, you have to dial 9 to get an outside line to call anyone. So we've had this happen before where someone is in a panic, they need to call 911. So you have to, and it won't work, you have to call 911. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware. And I think most teachers have put sticky notes on their phone or have it written on there as a reminder. But it is just kind of a wonky thing with our phone system that you dial 9 first and then your number. And then we have, every school has procedures for evacuations, for lockdown. So we have fire drills and lockdown drills. And you'll find all the information for that in a wall pocket. So there's a plastic wall pocket that has the folder in there. It has a red and green card. So if you have to go out on a fire drill, you'd hold the red card up if you are missing a student or need help. Green card means everyone's there and A-OK. And you'll also find your first aid kit, your emergency cards, class roster, those kinds of things with you. So when you're checking in at the office, and the teacher will leave emergency procedures, and each school site has their emergency procedures. And then Christy had a question.
Do we send those students to the office with their stuff to go home?
Christy, I would, if someone is not feeling well, I would call the office, let them know you're sending a student, and then the office will call you and let you know what to do with their things. So, yeah. All right, and let's see what next on our, and the last thing, part of the handbook here is just that document I told you about, the site check-in time. So these are all of our schools and our preschools with their arrival time and their checkout time. So again, as a sub, you're paid for that kind of, 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after kind of time. So I would just maybe lean more towards coming earlier and leaving a little earlier so that you have that time before school to really focus, so that you know what is going on with the technology. And then at the end of the day, it's going to be important when you check out to make sure that everything is locked up and all the Chromebooks and the technology is secure.
So Savannah has a question. How do you distinguish between a student who's really sick or one who is wanting to go home? So they say they're sick, but aren't actually sick. So
I would say, because of COVID, err on the side of caution and call the office. Sometimes the office they know the kids pretty well, but it's still worth it to send them to the office. So each school is going to have like a little isolation room where if a child's presenting with a fever, they isolate them right away. And the site secretary will go in with gloves and a face shield and all of that and assess them. But that is not your job to determine who's sick and who's faking it. You need to protect yourself and you need to protect the other students. So I would just err on the side of caution at this time. In normal times, you could just say, well, let's just see how you feel.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll be fine.
all right, so
Okay.
that's it.
Are there any questions about the handbook? I know the guest teacher handbook is more non-COVID related, but if you take the time, there's just some good tips in there. And it's a nice document to have. All right, let's go on.
So
So-
I have a question. I have a couple questions actually. So I did a 30-day long-term stint with Argonaut High School and their history department, and I had to spend a fair amount of time, learning, not only the Google Classroom but also Aries, both from a grading standpoint. And probably more so that's related to, this meeting, the attendance. So my question would be, in a hybrid model, when I guess, how do I explain this? Last year I got a hard copy and I took attendance because the kids weren't in class. Here, you're going to have some kids in class and some kids learning remotely. So are all the teachers going to have access to Aries and be able to input that information, into Aries? And if so, are they going to have the training, to do so?
Yeah, that's a great question, Martin. And we were talking with Sean about that. So once all of the guest teachers have their district email and password, they will be able to go into Aries. We won't be training. If you're just a day-to-day sub, you will not need to go into Aries. But if you are a long-term sub, then yes, that's a whole different game.
Right. And we can definitely provide training on Aries. We have a few teachers who are real experts on using that system. So that's something we can definitely, put on the calendar for the, long-term subs who will need it. In terms of the specific attendance tracking with the hybrid and the distance learning, the sites are still kind of working that out. And so we'll kind of share with you how you'll get that information before November 16th when we go back, because that's a great question, and unfortunately we don't have a specific answer today on how attendance will work for hybrid.
Yeah, that's still being negotiated. Nick, you had a good question about the emergency evacuations. We were speaking about that in our Ed Services meeting today, and Sean let us know that it's required monthly that they test the bells, but in this period of COVID, we're probably not going to be having fire drills where the kids are walking outside. So unless someone pulls the alarm, hopefully you won't have to deal with that as a sub during this period. They'll just have to test the bells monthly, but we probably won't be doing full-on fire drills. However, if you are there as a substitute and it's hybrid, know that you're probably only going to have about 10 students there at a time, 10 to 14. So it's going to be many fewer, and it would have to be, the teachers, if they are going to be doing some kind of drills, will be practicing with them how to walk out, maintaining that 6 feet distance and where they all line up. So they will have practiced. And Sinead has been working on this document that we're going to share with the principals, that every school site is going to fill in their emergency procedures. So they will be updated for this period of COVID. So we are aware that our emergency procedures need to be updated,
Right.
and that's something we're working on.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
One
about.
One of the ways I've mitigated that issue is I've asked the attendance folks to give me a separate sheet of attendance records, so that I always have the right class with all the names at that particular period, because we have run into a situation where those emergency folders have not been updated.
Well, and I'm guessing, that if, when you're a long-term sub and you've got, the same kids in the same classroom, and in my situation, I'm on Aries, and, I have Google Classroom, and everything is we're talking back and forth. That was a fairly sizable push-up, for a non-teacher, to actually achieve that. Having said that, I'm trying to speak to, the teachers that may be here that have not taught a class yet, and how do they, what would you suggest how they take attendance? Because it's important, that, attendance be taken and be put in. And then the other thing that we haven't talked about is, engagement, right? So, for the first, 6 weeks of class, there is an engagement component, and has that changed?
Okay, so Martin, we're right on, if you look at our slideshow, we're right about to talk about our attendance protocols, and those have changed for distance learning, so hopefully that'll answer your questions. So within distance learning, the protocol right now for a daily sub, not a long-term sub, but the daily sub is just to keep a record of who logged in to either a pre-recorded lesson that the teacher left, or who is logging in during live instruction or office hours. So any student that you engage with during distance learning, if they email a question, if they are in a live meeting, if they came into an office hour, any student that you had any kind of engagement with, you keep a recorded log for that. Because if you see the attendance tracking directions, those are the directions for using Aries and for putting in attendance. Now, substitutes will not be asked to go into Aries and record attendance. The teachers do it weekly, and it's by what is turned in and how they did. So if a child is engaging, we talked about engagement. So if a child is participating and engaging and has turned in work, then the regular teacher will go into Aries on a weekly basis and take the attendance that way. So that's a little different. If you're a long-term sub, you'd want to look at those attendance tracking directions. I think I have them linked also on our, yes, I do, on the agenda. And that's step-by-step in areas how you would do that. But this would only be for a long-term sub, and the administrator and the other teachers would go over it with you, how to do that. So it has the process for recording weekly engagement and taking attendance. This would only be if you are long-term subbing. So just know that if you are a distance learning substitute on a daily basis, all you need to do is record for the teacher who you had interaction with, who engaged. Mm-hmm. Now, hybrid, right now, the plan for hybrid for elementary is 2 cohorts. One comes on Monday and Thursday, and the other comes Tuesday, Friday, and nobody's there on Wednesday, so that they can do some deep cleaning of the schools. And so for that day, all you have to do is take attendance for the students that are there. And so that'll be the same as it was prior to COVID. So when you check in at the office, the site secretary will give you an attendance sheet to just mark who is there, who is not. I don't think they're really worrying about, someone made a question about tardy.
Right.
I don't think they're really worried about that this year. We're just who has come, who has not come.
Right. And for secondary, in terms of taking attendance for the hybrid, that's still kind of being figured out, because secondary teachers are going to have students in person, a small number, probably between 10 to 14, but then they'll also have students logging in virtually simultaneously. And so how attendance is going to be taken in that situation, I think they're still kind of figuring out the details. By November 16th, I'm sure they'll have that hashed out and ready to go in terms of explaining, how are you going to keep track of who's logged in, as well as, who's there in person. I think the in-person part's easy. The distance learning component will be a bit more tricky.
Right. Did that address, Martin, your question?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge, one of the big challenges for me, in distance learning in my long-term sub assignment, was to, figure out how to get a response from the kids. And so, in Google Classroom, what I came up with was, a simple question is, are you here? And so, and they answered yes, in Google Classroom. It was an assignment that I would give them, at the beginning of every class is, are you here? And so that gave me, a log, of everybody that was there. And then I would cross-reference that, with, the kids that turned in, their assignments. So, when you've got 30 kids in your class and, you give them that assignment, and the kids, may be logged into your Google Classroom. They may be a Google Meet for your class, but, they turn off their camera, they turn off their microphone, and they walk away and they play video games on their phone, right? So, but if they turn in their assignment, then, I counted them as being engaged.
Right.
Right. So, but that's a process to go through. And I guess my question is, for the teachers that are, not going to be long-term subs, how, we really do need to, help them, through this process, because it is very challenging. And, if it's only a day, right? I mean, it's even more challenging. And the district let me know, how important it is for attendance, during these times.
I lost audio. It disappeared.
Sorry, Nick. Anyway, yes, it's just one layer, an additional layer of responsibility, that I would hope, we could help, the teachers that are not long-term subs. I've been through it, I get it. I've got my Aries login. I've got my, my district login. I've been there for, 30 days. It's going to be way easier for me than someone who has not taught a class yet. So, maybe we do, I don't know, maybe we do another training, or maybe we give out some of the Aries training or whatever, or set the expectations, or like you say, you're going through this process, make sure that we get this, up front so that we can do a good job for you. I mean,
exactly. And that's what we're here for. So hopefully some of the issues you're bringing up, Martin will address in the next half of this training or this orientation.
Okay.
And then
Okay,
I
good,
like
good.
the idea that, one of the things is we have a process for you to give us feedback about things that are coming up for you as you, start subbing in the classroom, especially if you're new. So we kind of know what the needs are so that we can, the one benefit of, this world that we're living in now, it's so much easier to get everybody in one space for a training. So, if we get feedback from you about what you're interested in or what you think will help you out, we can help provide that much easier than we were before, pre-COVID. So thank you for that.
Right. And I think Christy had a good point. Someone was asking, are we putting 1s, 2s, 3s to level the engagement? That's something you could let a teacher know in your notes afterwards. I don't think really for the just day-to-day subs, you just need to know that if you just leave a list for the teacher of who engaged, and you could, if you wanted to make a code for that teacher, you could, but it's really who engaged. And Christy had a point with that, and we'll get into that when you're in the Google Classroom. Yeah, you're not going to be posting your own assignments in Google Classroom, but Sinead will get into that. Okay.
Yeah, my question about the 3s and the 2s and the 1s was more obviously a long-term sub position situation where you have students logging into the Zoom meeting or the Google Meet, and maybe in an hour and a half long class session they log in 45 minutes late and leave about 10 minutes later. And so yes, they showed up. No, they didn't actually learn anything. They weren't there for any of the instruction. And so, and again, this was a long-term submission, but what's the appropriate way to communicate that when I've got, 6 weeks worth of attendance records I'm trying to pass on to the teacher of record. And I felt like giving them a 3 didn't make a whole lot of sense. Does the district have, all I knew was a 3. Is there a 2 and a 1? And what do those mean versus a 3? And the whole system of attendance codes was never really explained to me, so I was kind of winging it. So I was wondering if you guys were able to provide any more insight on that.
I sure wish we were able to, Jacqueline. But I think everybody is kind of winging it in that respect. So I think the narrative you provided, just in explaining it to us, would probably be sufficient to pass on to the permanent teacher. Just because I think, those are the same concerns that, our classroom teachers have as well. Like, how do you quantify this kind of nebulous attendance? So I think your narrative was perfect.
And
I've lost the sound from the system again.
I'm sorry, Nick.
Yeah, try logging off and logging back on. That seems to help me when that happens. All right, so Linda, you have one more slide.
Okay. Whew. And then you get into the nitty gritty of Google Classroom with Sinead. So just to kind of sum up what
so let me interrupt a bit here, right? Just so we can actually give people some perspective that are distance learning, right? What Nick's going through right now, a lot of these kids are going through in your lessons. Right? I've lost my audio. I've lost this. And so, it's very disruptive as you're going through a lecture or a presentation or, something of that nature. And you've got one child that's like, I can't hear you. Or, it's so be prepared for that. And, and to log in and log back, log off, log back in is probably the best thing that you can do, but then it may have to even go deeper. You may have to go reboot your router and, all of those kinds of things, because it is technology and, it is very challenging,
Right.
Trust me, I taught high school kids that are, technologically, advanced, but if you're teaching, third, fourth, fifth graders, and it's it can be very, it will be very challenging. It will be very challenging. So thank you for that comment.
Absolutely. And that's, Martin, that brings up the great point that even when Catherine said, just with classroom management, managing a virtual classroom is very much the same way. There will be stresses. You're going to have to breathe, take a deep breath, and balance the needs of the individual students and the needs of the group. So, in these moments, you try to help out the individual student as much as you can with the quick tech tips, like log out and try to log back in. But at the same time, you don't want to derail the entire lesson for the other, 20 kids, 30 kids that are logged on, to stop everything and troubleshoot. So usually if I were teaching in this manner, I would, try to help the student in the most concise way that I could. And then once the class was over, to go back and reach out to that student individually to try to help, troubleshoot that tech support. Because it could very easily, if you only have the students for 45 minutes to an hour logging on, you probably don't have that amount of time to work out the 3 or 4 issues that could be happening simultaneously. And that even happens to us while we're here, using our technology that we're pretty comfortable with. Every now and then when I log on to, Google Meet, I will sound like a robot. And, or sometimes I have to unplug my webcam and twirl it over my head a few times and blow on it and plug it back in. And there's no rhyme or reason to it, but it just, it's that take a deep breath, keep your composure, know that it's going to be okay, and not let yourself get too flustered, because you're absolutely right. Each and every one of us, has to kind of navigate these issues now. And they're different issues than we had in the classroom, but those same issues happen in the classroom. It just might be an eraser flying across the classroom. That's, just different issues.
Right. And I think that is so important. Just give yourself the grace to just relax and know that you can only do what you can do. And, the teachers are running into this every day also. We came back from fall break and 2 schools got dropped off of studies weekly. And so they're like, what the heck? And, these things are just constantly happening. So Martin, you had a great point, is expect the unexpected during this time. If you are a distance learning sub, I think hybrid will be a little more normal, because you'll be in a classroom setting. You'll still be using district technology and Google Classroom, but give yourself a little grace. Practice with all of these things. So if you look at the slide, this last slide is where we really did want to talk about some of that district technology. So when you are checking in, remember, if you are a distance learning guest teacher or a hybrid, you'll be going to the school, checking in with the office and working from the school site. So do ask them about their site-specific health and safety protocols, like Nick had brought up. What are those emergency protocols? Have they been updated? So yes, everything has been updated. Check with and make sure that you are familiar with those. Make sure you have the daily schedule. How are students moving around the campus? Those attendance procedures we talked about. Remember, if you are a daily sub, just mark down who was involved with distance learning, if that's what you're doing, hybrid, who is present. And then to be aware of the last 3 bullets are really important in terms of the audio video equipment, Chromebooks, and document cameras. So be aware that it's probably going to take you 2 Chromebooks if you're a distance learning teacher to navigate it. Right now for Sinead, we've got 3 going on just so that we can monitor chat rooms and split screens and look at documents. But you're probably going to need 2 Chromebooks. We've let all the principals know, so you'll have if you're, Sinead will go into that when you're running a Google Meet, you'll need one to monitor the chat and watch the students, one to do your presentation. So you're going to want to practice logging on, logging off, working through that. Document cameras, a lot of teachers are going to ask you to, share a math page or something. And so you hook the document camera into the Chromebook. And so all of those are kind of site specific with what their technology is at that site. And we will be asking, like I said, Sinead made us a great form where teachers are going to fill that out with what technology they have in the classroom. Here are the directions for using it. So that's why, again, we say get there early, practice, practice, practice. And like Martin said, expect the unexpected. I don't think one single teacher goes through a day where they don't have kids saying, I can't see that, I can't get in, this place won't open. So it's, do the best you can with the turn it off, turn it on, clear your cookies, get your parent involved. We can only do what we can do and then leave notes for the teacher. But take that time to pause, to take a moment and try not to be flustered. So, okay, so Sinead now is going to dive deep into the Google Classroom.
All right. So one of the things I think I'm going to bring something a little ahead in the agenda. I just want to show it to you because we've been referencing it. And I hate it when people keep referencing things in presentations, but I haven't been able to lay my eyes on it. So one of the things we know for sure is that you can only be as successful as you are set up to be by the teacher leaving the classroom and the school site. And Linda and I've taught long enough to know that, when you go into a classroom, some teachers will leave you a novel with instructions on how their class runs. And then you'll go into the class next door and it'll be a few scribbles on a Post-it note. And what we're trying to do is make sure that the scribbles and the Post-it note do not happen. They shouldn't happen ever. They shouldn't have happened prior to March 2019, but they really, really shouldn't happen now in this environment. So one of the things we're trying to do to make it easier for our guest teachers as well as our classroom teachers is we're going to try to create a more uniform template for the sub-plan. So we'll have it for the hybrid classroom, and we'll also have it for if you're just doing distance learning. And it's still in progress. We still have a ways to go, and we're going to be asking for your feedback on this. But as I'm going through kind of the Google Classroom and the Meets and the Zoom kind of nitty-gritty things, keep in mind things that you as a substitute teacher really want in your sub plans. So what we're going to do, our vision is that every teacher would get something, every substitute would get something like this filled out for any classroom that they're teaching in. So as Martin brought up the attendance procedures, we know those are going to be a little bit different depending on if you're at a high school or at an elementary school in terms of doing hybrid. So we're hoping to have each school site really flesh out the attendance procedures for their site. Any specific health and safety protocol specific to that site, because we know that we have district health and safety guidelines, but each campus is a little different. The grade levels are a little different. So there's going to be some nuance there. And we're going to want to make sure that that's captured on these plans. We're going to be talking about the Meet links and the Zoom links. Like it's, where do I find that link and where does the teacher keep that? Because you'll go into different classrooms, and because teachers are individuals and kind of have their own style, those might be in different places. So we're trying to create this. I won't go through the whole thing. A whole section for special accommodations for students with IEPs, 504s, and EL students, so that if there are special instructions, I know it's horrible when a sub goes into a room blind and, has a student with, who's, on the spectrum and very rigid, and you don't know that, and you ask him to sit somewhere that he doesn't usually sit, and then all of a sudden a really, stressful situation for everyone ensues. So we're hoping to try to have a lot of this pre-done so that in an emergency, a teacher can leave and you will be set up for success. So that's kind of our goal. And we know that really setting you guys up for success really is the teacher and the school site setting you up for success. And so that's kind of our plan. So keep this in the back of your mind. It's not done. It's still in progress. And we really, at the end, are going to be asking you for some feedback about what you think needs to be included on here that we may not have thought about, having not been substitute teachers ourselves for a while. So we think we have a good draft, but I'm sure we're missing something.
And part of the
Can I make a comment? I'm sorry to be talking so much, but can I tell you what I would like to see?
Sure. Can you, that you definitely, but can you wait to the end, Martin? We're going to have a process.
I can, but I'll just make a quick comment and then I'll let you go. But one of the things that happens with guest teachers is that the district employees use a lot of acronyms and we don't know what they mean. So IEP 504, right? I have no idea what that means. And so it'd be helpful if there is a list possibly at some point that could, explain that to us.
That is a great idea. And I'm writing that down. So if you don't get a chance to add that to our feedback at the end, I will make sure to add it for you, Martin. That's a great idea. All right. So one of the things we're going to transition now really just to look at the platforms that we are now using to teach that many teachers were using before COVID, but now pretty much all teachers are using. And so one of the platforms we're using is Google Classroom. And at the start of this year, there was a lot of debate about whether or not we should be able to use Google Classroom or Seesaw or ClassDojo. And as a district, we felt in order to save our families a bunch of grief, having to learn all these different platforms, and even our guest teachers, that we really needed to limit it so that there would be consistency. So we use Google Classroom. And the very first thing that you'll need to do to access it, but first I'll step back. So Sean had mentioned it and Linda had mentioned it, that now all of our substitutes, whether you're a daily sub or a long-term sub, will have an ACUSD email account. Now that's super duper important. Mr. Ragasano can tell you why it's so important. Because this is going to allow you to log into our Google platform, which will give you access to email, Google Classroom, Jamboard, etc. Things that you don't, calendar, things that you wouldn't have had access to before. Now, one of the procedures we're going to put into place is that before you have your sub, you arrive, the teacher of that classroom or the principal at that site is going to add you as a co-teacher into the Google Classroom. And we'll show you how to get there if you've never been there before. So if you go, I'll open up a screen. So can you see where my little icon is? All right. So I've learned that this is called the waffle. It's what I used to call the dot square, right by either your initials or your picture. And when you click on this waffle and you scroll down, you'll see a classroom icon. Now, when you click on the classroom icon, you will see any classroom that you've either created or one that you've been added to as a co-teacher. So in preparation for today, I asked two of my favorite teachers, Mr. Kantak and the one I'm married to, if they would add me as a co-teacher to their classroom so I could show you what it would look like. And I picked these two just because one's elementary, one is high school, and they have some similarities in how they organize their Google Classroom and some differences. And I've noticed some of you have mentioned, like there's going to be, just as Linda had mentioned before, there's going to be some variance in how teachers use these tools. So it's going to be important that you kind of log in a little early and poke around through these classrooms so you can kind of get familiar with how this teacher has organized their space.
Can I break in? So it'll be important to use the waffle, go to Google Classroom, and if nothing shows up, that means you haven't been added to a classroom yet. So if you're at school, then you go straight to the administrator, because all of the site administrators are teachers within their teachers Google Classroom, so they can add you. So if there was a emergency situation and they needed a sub and the teacher didn't have time to add you, the administrator can. So that'll be a good test. If you open the waffle and click on Google Classroom and nothing is there, then go to the principal and you'll have access.
Right. So when you go into this classroom, so this is Mr. Kantak, it's his 9th grade AVID class. The very first page that opens up is the stream. Now, in the stream, this is where if they post classwork or assignments, or they have a message to their students, they post it up here, and it's like the home page. Now, one of the things you may notice is that teachers kind of use the stream a little differently. Mr. Kantak has it set up so that none of his students can post in the stream. If you go back to, I'll open another window here. You go to Mr. Clement's classroom. He likes to let students post in the stream. Now, I wouldn't recommend, and I'll tell you how to turn this off, because the very, very first time I allowed students to, I opened my first Google Classroom, I didn't understand anything about how it worked. I had students posting some pretty distracting and, quite frankly, some ugly stuff in the stream, and I didn't know how to make it stop. So I'll show you how to make it stop if you're in that situation. So Mr. Clement, my husband, he lets students comment, and because he has that relationship with them, has gone through some protocols about what is appropriate to put into the stream and what is not appropriate, has really gone over sort of like the etiquette of using these virtual platforms. Now, if you're in a classroom like this, and you're noticing students are posting things here that are just not appropriate, and one of the benefits for you is it's documented. There's no way to erase it, unfortunately, very easily, but you can go and you can turn the stream off. And the way to do that is if you go up to the gear, I think that's a gear, over by the waffle, it'll give you the class settings. And you scroll down, and where it says stream, you can make it so that only teacher can post or comment. So that's a really quick way to shut anything down that's inappropriate in Google Classroom in the stream. And then you hit save, and you would just, in your note to that teacher at the end of the day, say, I turned off the stream in your classroom because X or Y happened. They'll be able to see it. And then if you're just there for a day or two, you can allow that teacher to deal with the, the consequence for that action. Or if it's something really egregious, you can have your administrator log in and see what was posted, because everything's pretty transparent with Google Classroom that way. So that's one thing to keep in mind just with the stream. Now, another thing you'll notice is that teachers use this classroom tab. So you have the stream, and then you have classwork, not classroom, classwork. Now, this is an elementary classroom. And so this teacher organized the work based on subject, because he teaches all subjects. So he has math, language arts, writing. And so you'll just want to familiarize yourself with how the teacher you're subbing for that day organizes the classwork. And the newest assignments that have been posted are always on top. So, and it'll show you the day they were posted. Now, if you look at Mr. Kantak's classwork, he organizes it a bit differently because he's a high school teacher. In his classwork, because he doesn't use Meets, he's pinned his permanent Zoom link to the top. He has his PSPS lesson plans already in there. He has a bank of resources that students are to refer back to. And you have to keep scrolling to find the actual assignments from that week. Now, unfortunately, one of the drawbacks of this Google Classroom is that it puts the newest stuff on the bottom. And I know that's something teachers are trying to get them to fix, but you have to scroll. So you'd have to scroll down to find the current assignments. So like Linda had mentioned before, it's going to be important that you probably log in a little bit early just to familiarize yourself with this specific teacher's classroom. Now, the people tab, so we had stream, we have classwork, and we have people. Now, for people, this is kind of a useful tool. So, and this could be very helpful in the situation that like Nick found himself in earlier, where he wasn't able to get the audio. So you up here, you have the teachers. These are all of the adults that are co-teachers in his classroom. So you'll see both of his administrators are on there. And down here, you have a list of all of the students in the classroom. Now, what's beautiful is that, say Sarah here was having difficulty with technology earlier, and you wanted to follow up with her and see how things are going. You can click on Sarah, and if you have this little drop-down menu, you can just email Sarah, and it'll go straight to your inbox, and you can send Sarah a message right out of the Google Classroom, which is really helpful. Another thing that is kind of a nice tip, like if you have a really, really positive day with your students, I'd probably leave any negative communication to the teacher of record, especially if you're a daily sub. But if you wanted to, give a high five and be known as that sub who sends home positive notes at the end to kind of encourage that behavior in the future, you can always send a nice positive email home saying, we had a great day today. I enjoyed, working with your students. That could be something that, it could be used for as well. Again, I'd leave any really kind of dicey communication for the teacher of record, but it could be used as like a positive reinforcement, especially if you sub in one particular school a lot. So this is a useful tool. Now, any questions about Google Classroom at this time? We see our superintendent, Dr. Amy Slavinsky, is here. Amy, did you want to say anything to our crop of fabulous substitute teachers?
Thank you, Sinead and Linda. I just wanted to say thank you. And that's so I decided to type it into the chat. I didn't want to be disruptive or interrupt the great flow that is going on here. I just wanted to drop in for a couple of minutes and say that I so tremendously appreciate everything that Sinead and Linda are doing to help you prepare. And I so appreciate all of you in this meeting, stepping up and being part of the team and helping us out, especially during these really, really difficult times. So I don't want to take any more of your precious time, but just know that all of you are very much appreciated by me personally and by our whole team. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, thank you. I was muted. So are there any other questions about just Google Classroom at this time?
You want to talk about the grading system at all?
Well, that's a great question, Martin. I thought about that, but it's one of those things that really gets into the weeds. And I just don't know if it might be better to kind of do a separate training on just grading in Google Classroom for long-term subs or teachers, because it probably wouldn't apply to most people on this call.
Mm-hmm. And every teacher has a different process. So it's really going to be, if you are a long-term sub, you're probably going to be working with your administrator, a grade level partner, or a department head to kind of walk you through that. Because as a daily sub, you're not going to be asked to do
Fair enough.
And but that is good, good something for us to keep considering, especially for people who end up in long-term situations as it happens. So if there aren't any questions about Google
I had,
Classroom,
Sinead, if you don't mind me asking really quickly, in an emergency situation where, you know, a teacher didn't plan on being gone, and then they are, and there's nothing already pre-posted in their Google Classroom as assignments for the day,
right?
how would we, in either the hybrid or the distance learning situation, handle that?
That is a really, really great question. So one of the things now, we do have the PSPS lesson plans, which are essentially emergency lesson plans that we hope that every teacher has. So I can see in like that could get you through maybe a day, but then there really should be, and that might be one of Linda and my next projects, is really coming up with a series of emergency lesson plans that can be used at different grade bands for those situations, because yes, that does happen a lot. And so we do need to, that's a good next project for us to put together. And the great thing now, one of the silver linings of this, situation is so many organizations have stepped up and kind of made things like that are readily available. So we're more connected with resources than ever before. All right. So, okay, I'll see. So we're going to move on to just using Google Meets. Just unfortunately with Meets, it doesn't really have the same engagement tools that Zoom has. So one of the things I'll have us do, give me just a good old fashioned thumbs up if you have used Meets before and feel really comfortable with it. Okay, nope. I see a few thumbs. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this screen for a moment. And we'll start with Meets. Now, we're going to go down, actually, I probably shouldn't have stopped sharing that. I'm going to share my screen once again. I went a little too fast. All right, so I'm going to share the entire screen again. So there are basically two platforms we use to conduct our live classrooms. Teachers either have the option of using Google Meet. I often say Google Meets because I learned it wrong the first time, and now I can never drop the S, so I'm always going to be that weird person who pronounces it incorrectly, even though I know it's Google Meet, and Zoom. Now, the benefit of Google Meet is that it's integrated in our Google Suite platform, which we're all using. And so if you notice here in Google Classroom, there is a Meet link up here at the top. Now, some teachers use this feature, but not all. So this is something that teachers are going to need to put in their sub plans. Now, the benefit of teachers using this link is that it doesn't allow students to log on prior to them showing up. If you go into this Meet link, you're not logged on, students aren't able to log on either, and it's in the banner and it's easy to find. Now, for some teachers, they don't really like it this way because they want students to have sort of like an indicator of when they need to log on. This is especially true with our RSP students, or students who are in resource, because their teachers are having them log on at 9:15 and then again at like 11:20. And so they needed sort of a visual cue for those students to know where to log on. And so if you're substituting in an elementary classroom or in a resource classroom, teachers might not be using this link for their students to log on. And I'll show you how it can also be done. I'll pretend to log in as my son.
And while you're doing that, can I address, Carla asked in the chat if we would be going over procedures for hybrid. So I just wanted to mention too that because during this period, teachers have been doing distance learning and kids are working in Google Classroom, that when they go back in hybrid, most likely you'll be still working within Google Classroom. You might not have to do a meet per se, but you'll still be going into Google Classroom for the assignments that the teacher left.
Right.
So if you're not in Google Classroom, and then they'll just be leaving old-fashioned sub-plans like here's their reading book, here's their math book, you're going to do this lesson, you'll still need to know that technology of how to use the document cameras. And I imagine the kids will still be on their Chromebooks to complete most of their writing assignments and such.
Yeah, especially at the secondary level, because they're simultaneously doing hybrid and distance learning. So Google Classroom is still going to be something that will definitely not be going away. I think most teachers are going to be continuing to use it throughout the year.
And then Carla mentioned communicating with the distance learner while you're teaching in hybrid. And you at the elementary level, Carla, you won't have to worry about that. The kids who are there like Monday, Thursday, if you're a sub on a Monday, you're just dealing with those kids that are there. The teacher will have left kind of packets or other assignments for the other students. You won't be required to check in with those students. You'll just be dealing with the students who are in front of you at school, which is nice because we really can't be expected to be doing two things at once.
At secondary, that is not exactly the same situation. So we're still figuring that out. So, the classroom teachers and the administrators at the secondary level right now are beta testing how it's all going to work. And I'm confident that they'll come up with a solution. It's just, we're still, trying to make all of our mistakes before November 16th so that, we'll have made all the mistakes by then and we'll have it smoothed out.
Yeah, we're definitely all learning together.
Yes, definitely learning together. So what I have now is I opened up a Google account. You can see it has a little R there because it's my son's classroom. So I'll just show you how his teacher shares out the Meet links, because this is something that if you're especially subbing, like I said, in a resource class or at the elementary level, maybe the way that your students are going to get this link. So if they're having difficulty, you can guide them there. So they've logged into Google, and he just goes to his waffle. And at this point, they're probably trained to go to their calendar. And so in the calendar, his teacher shared out the Meet links for the entire week. And so what's nice about this is a visual cue, okay, at 10:30, and there's this little line that kind of goes down the page. And so my son stays at home without a real adult doing distance learning. My high school daughter is there with him, and we just keep this page open. And so he can see as the line moves, when it gets close to this box, he needs to log in. So that's, one way that it's being shared with students. And you can see his teacher is also, this is linked with the Google Classroom. So you can also see what assignments are due. So just kind of a visual. You probably won't see it on this end, but this is what the students may be seeing, and this might be what they're trained to do. So if they're struggling with finding the links, they can just go to their waffle and try finding it in the calendar. And this is definitely true. I was working with Mrs. Neville over at Sutter Creek, and she has resource kids meeting at all different times, and this is how she's been communicating the times and the links with them.
Yeah, all of the elementary resource teachers are using this system over at Ione Elementary itself. This is, I think most of the elementaries are using this.
And unfortunately, because it's one of the inconsistent things, like where students are finding these meets, I've even know some teachers actually are creating separate meets and they're putting them in the stream, which is another. So it goes back to this template we're hoping that teachers will complete to definitely remember, for them to remind you or let you know where the link is, where they put it for their students, and where you're going to be able to log in. So that's going to be super important for those teachers to set you up for success in terms of how do you get into the meets. Now, I'll show you what to do once you are in the right spot. So now I'm gonna, this move right here blows me away. It's not the Matrix. I think it's Inception, where I go deeper and deeper. I'm gonna share my screen of it. So it's gonna be kind of.
We practiced it this morning
just
and it worked.
To make sure it would work. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna present my screen, but I'm gonna present the screen where, I have to stop presenting that screen. All
We're
right.
gonna take you into a Zoom meeting, right?
No, we're just going into I'm presenting my screen at this meeting.
Oh, okay.
I'll go here. Perfect. All right, so now do you see all of your faces? But like, can you see my Zooms, my Meets tools? All right, awesome. So here's a couple of things that you should be able to know right away. So in Meets, when you are the host, right next to where the name of the training is, there's this little, I guess, what do you call it? A shield with a lock. This is the host controls. This is super important because kids can be stinkers. I love kids, but they don't always make good choices. And so one of the things you can do, because in Meets, everybody gets the "you are presenting" button. And kids have been known to hijack the Meets meetings by sharing their screens. So if you want to prevent them from doing that, you can turn it off so that they are no longer able to present their screens, so that only you as the host is able to do that. And so if you trust your students or you're actually doing an activity where you want them to present their screens, you can turn it back on. But it's always nice to know that you can turn that off for everybody just in the host controls. Now, another thing you may choose to turn off, I don't know how many of you have had to teach with Meet or Zoom, is that sometimes a chat can get a little out of hand. And I remember even just as a parent, like that first couple of days when I was listening to my son in his classroom and kids are typing all sorts of nonsense in the chat. And it's becoming more distracting than it is useful. So you can just as a host control, you can turn off the chat for students so that they can't write anything in the chat, which is also something that is really useful as well, because sometimes you need to just shut that down. And so that's probably the first thing you can see. Now, another thing you can do, and I'm seeing like right here, is say, for example, somebody logs on and they're not muted. So Nick, can I ask you to unmute yourself for a minute? So there's Nick, and he's like,
I'm unmuted.
I
could talk. I could talk all over.
Dude, what up?
You can unmute me.
you can. And then there's Martin too, and you can mute them. Sometimes people are unmuted and they don't even realize it. So if you just put your icon over their little square, you can click the mute button. And they can always unmute themselves, but you can always remute them. So you could give them a warning if somebody's being really naughty. Now, I won't do this, but if you have a student who is hijacking your Meet and you need to remove them, I mean, this would be a last resort, but I'm just going to show you just in case you ever need it. You can, this is like my fantasy, what I would do in my head in my classroom. It's like Veruca Salt going down the bad egg. But if you need an emergency button, there's right next to the mute button, there's this little like minus sign where you just can click that and remove them from the meeting. I mean, you wouldn't want to use that without really thinking it through. It might also be useful if you see something in the background or something's happening that you want to protect your whole class from seeing. If you ever see a situation where, you know, it's like that would not be good for everybody to see, you can just click that button and it just removes them from the meeting. And then you can follow up afterwards. So that's a feature too. There isn't really a way to like turn their camera off. I mean, we've heard, I mean, COVID has provided lots of really funny Zoom stories for teachers, things that kind of happen. Now, the other icon you'll see there is this little pin.
I've used that a couple of times, actually. I mean, that's a very important, you know, feature for people to pay attention to, because you will use that one. Just remove them from the meeting. You don't have to
Right.
take them to the office. You just take them out of the class. It's great.
Yeah, and it's one of those
Is
things.
there a way, is there a way to prevent them from doing that? Because I just noticed that if I run my cursor over, I see little minus signs that I can go ahead. Oh, you can't, okay, you can't remove this participant. Okay, there
Yes.
it goes.
So the only person that can do that is the host. So that's nice. And in Zoom, you can move the host around. Meets doesn't do that, or Meet doesn't do that. But it is one of the features in Meet. Another feature that's really kind of useful, but you have to train the students. There's no way to really get them to do this. There's like a little pin. So if you want to give somebody the floor, or you really just want to focus on a specific person, you can pin them. So I'm going to pin Martin. So now everybody gets to see Martin. Now, unfortunately, unless you're doing what I'm doing, if I pin Martin, not everybody else has Martin pinned. So one of the things you can instruct students to do is we're going to pin, and some teachers will do this, they'll actually have a separate computer going where they're doing their instruction or their dot cam. So they'll have a Zoom meet here, and then they'll actually have a second Zoom meet going, which is something we'll hope teachers have in their sub-plans if that's how they're operating it. But the nice thing about that is that they can just ask everybody to pin the dot cam to their screen so everyone can see that clearly. I wish Zoom had a way of pushing it out to force everybody, but you can just have kids put your cursor on top of the box of the dot cam and click the pin so everyone can see. I'll pin Mindy for a moment for everybody. So,
And this is something I know that a lot of the teachers of the littles, the kindergarten teachers, have really trained. So they'll go to the kids, say, okay, everyone, go into, the people and pin me, so that everyone's looking at the teacher and not looking at everyone else. And so a lot of the kids have been trained to do that. And that's something hopefully the teacher will leave in their instructions under technology.
Yeah, and the nice thing, it's pretty intuitive, and the kids are, they're so much better at finding this stuff than we are. That's what makes it dangerous sometimes. Another feature of Meet, which has been a long time coming, is you can view your participants in different ways. So if you go down to this, I used to call it the ... but I found out that it has a much more technical name. It's called the hot dog. Well, at least that's what people who are in more fancy roles than I am or have been calling it. So they've been calling this the hot dog, and I'll go with that. That sounds like it goes with waffles, sort of. So if you click here, you can change the layout of your screen. So the nice thing that they've added is now you can see up to 49 people on one screen. One of the limitations of Meet used to be that you could only see about 8 students, which wasn't satisfactory. So they added it up to 49. So you have the ability to see everybody on one screen.
And that would be on the tiled.
Yeah, on the tiled. And you can, if you want them to be bigger, you can show up to 6. And if you're like me, it's just kind of fun to do that. But then you could also do auto, where it'll highlight just the person who's speaking, and then when nobody's speaking, it goes back to tiled. You could do spotlight, which highlights the person who's just doing the most talking, or the person who's currently talking, or the sidebar. But I think right now, tiled tends to be the most useful layout, but just to know that it's there and you can change it to serve your purpose. That's one thing. Now, another thing that they've added recently is you can blur your background, and this may or may not work. This is one of those features that Meet has added to try to compete with Zoom. So you see, we purposely picked my side of the office because this is not necessarily the background you would want your students to see.
We're definitely Felix and Oscar.
Yeah, I cleaned up for all of you. So now, So this, yeah. So if you wanted to, one of the things a lot of districts are doing is they're encouraging students to blur their backgrounds, especially if they want students to turn their cameras on, but are concerned about maybe students being places where they don't want people to see their background. So this blur, I'll try it. It may or may not work. And certain devices don't. Did it work? Do I look like very groovy behind me? Yes.
Oh, it did work.
So there's nothing else fancy about it, other than this kind of everything's a little bit blurry. I can't put palm trees behind there. I can't put like a fake picture of, I don't know, Michael Jordan behind me like you can on Zoom, or Rafa Nadal for Linda. But I can have it kind of blurry. And so that's one feature. And if you are logging on to a device and you're trying to find that feature and it's not there, you're not crazy. You have to have some sort of, it's way beyond my scope of understanding of computers, but you have to have some sort of hardware on your device for it to work. So I don't get the blur option on my laptop, but I do on my desktop at work. So that may or may not be there.
And then you have to record.
And then the last thing we're going to show you that you may need to do is recording. So if you're going to be asked to record a meeting, you would click here. And then with Meets, what ends up happening is however long the file is. So if you recorded a 15-minute lesson, about 15 minutes later, you would get an email saying, here's your file of your recorded message. If you're recording for an hour or two, you may not get that file for an hour or two because it kind of depends on how long the file is for it to process and for you to get it. Whether or not you're going to be asked to record a meeting, I think is going to depend a lot on where you're teaching and the model that you're teaching in. So that will be something that we're going to, put on that checklist for teachers to include in their sub-plans, because I'm sure that's going to vary a lot from site to site and from classroom to classroom. And so,
but if you a really cool feature, because this is within that Google Suite. So if you are like at the high school level and you're asked to record a math lesson for the kids who weren't there to watch it, once you'll get an email and it goes directly into your Google Drive and it creates a folder. You don't have to do anything. If you go into your Google Drive, it'll be a little folder that says Google Meet, and you click on that and there's your recording and there's a link that you can share it with your students in Google Classroom. So, all of these work together within the Google Suite so nicely. So I know we're giving you a lot at once. I feel bad. It's already 4 o'clock. We're almost done. We were hoping to be done around 4. We've got a little bit more to go, but just know that you have time to play in all of this, and we can slow things down and work with you if you need more.
Absolutely. And so the last thing in Meet that you may use is they created a whiteboard option also to compete with Zoom, which is a Jamboard, which we'll show you later. So we won't spend time going through how this works, but just know that we'll circle back to this later. Any question about Meet while we're still on Meet? Not Meets.
I have a question. If a student is removed from the classroom, does he or she have a chance to re-enter?
Yes, that would depend on you. They could definitely re-log on, and that might be a good cooling off period. You told the student, I'm going to log you off for 5 minutes, like a timeout in a classroom, and you could say that they could return. If you don't want them to return, they had egregious behavior, you can just not let them back in, and then definitely follow up with an email to that student and the administrator, just documenting what happened and why you had to kick them out of the classroom. Yeah, but they definitely could log back in.
Thanks.
No problem. Any other questions about Meet?
I was also wondering, are we supposed to have the setting that they have to be approved before they can be added back? Or can we leave that open so that it's not interrupting like the classroom when they have to log back in?
That's a good question. You can leave that open, Mindy.
Okay, thanks.
For sure. Yeah, and it's one of those things sometimes, like I'm going to stop presenting on this screen and I'll show you what I do when I'm trying to play around in these features, because sometimes you don't have a scheduled meeting, you just want to go in and play. So I'll show you how to access a Meet where you can just, you know, play on your own. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop presenting here. I'm going to present on another screen here. So
Sinead and I practice all the time.
yes, because
we make up funny meets and just go blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Just so we can test things out.
So I'll show you where you can, like, if you want to just go around and have fun with your kids or your husband, and you just want to have like a Zoom date and play with, or a Meet date, I'll show you how to do that, where it's, you can kind of learn the features kind of in a safe way when you're not in front of a group of students. So I got to present my other screen now. So here, oops, is it up?
Yep.
All right, so if you go to your waffle again, where you went to go to Classroom, Meet is right next to Classroom. And you'll see they have the guest teacher training, but you can also just join or start and Meet here. And you don't have to have, nobody else has to be in the Meet with you. You can go in and play around in a Meet by yourself. So we call this, I'll just call this the La Meet.
And this is good if you just want to record a lesson to show students and you don't necessarily want to have them joining you, because you'll get that recording, it'll go right into the Google Classroom and the kids can click on it and just watch that recording. So you might want to just do that. And that's when we practice those all the time.
Yeah, so right here, if I hit join now, I'd be in a Meet by myself with Linda, of course. And if I recorded it, it would be just an easy way for me to record instructions for my students, or just, it's, you know, a place to go around and just get more familiar with the features. When I was trying to figure these things out, I would have my kids log in and I would have fun, you know, kicking them out and muting them and doing all of those kinds of things until I kind of got the hang of it. So that's just an easy thing to find just in your waffle. Nothing fancy. Now, any other questions about Meet before we move on to Zoom? Because you will have teachers that are Zoom teachers. After all of this, you're like, why would they use anything else? But we'll show you. Okay, so Zoom. So as you can see, even though there's this lovely Meet link, Mr. Kantak is a Zoom teacher, and he keeps his Zoom link here. Now, different teachers will put their Zoom links in different places. Now, Zoom is a lot like Meets, but it's kind of like the glossier Meet. It's been around a little longer and they've had more features. So I'm going to just log into a Zoom. And earlier today, I was trying to figure out how to do a Zoom while doing a Meet. And I found out that that was just too much for my computer. Like, that my computer finally said, oh, heck no, that is not going to happen. So I was hoping to get you in because Zoom is kind of fun. Zoom is kind of fun. Now, the nice thing about Zoom, now with your educator ACOSD email addresses, there's a free basic account for all teachers. And the only thing they ask is for that actual school issued email address. So all of you, once you have it, you can go to Zoom and you just click sign in with Google. And since you have a teacher email account, you will get the basic Zoom for free. And then you can kind of go in there and play with some of these tools, just like you did with Meet. So I'm going to open one of my meetings. I'll open a meeting and I'll just kind of show you why some teachers really like Zoom. I really like Zoom. I feel guilty for liking Zoom, but not really.
See, I'm a Meet girl. I prefer Meet. It's just and that's the thing, when you're guest teaching, it's just going to be whatever that teacher that you're subbing for prefers. So
we'll see here. See if this, actually, I'm just going to join a meeting. No. Oops. Go back. See, I'm getting lost. I'm doing too many things at once. Oops. So you get to see me fumble around here. let's see if this works. If my computer says no. All right. As you can see, my camera says I cannot split myself too many ways. So you're just going to see my avatar on the and continue with that audio. So in Zoom, I'll move this over. Here's why teachers like it. So just like Meet, there's a security. And this will be the first thing you want to probably check out. It's the same thing. Automatically, students can't share their screen unless you allow them to. And the same thing, the chat is automatically turned off unless you turn it on. So these are just security features that you can at any point. The other thing Zoom allows students to do is it allows them to rename themselves. So this is useful if like they're using their dad's computer, or you'll see things like that. And, you know, or sometimes I'll use Linda's computer and it'll say, I'm Linda Daly, like right now, because I'm logged in I'm using her Meets account. In Zoom, I'd actually be able to go in and rename myself. And you would do that. This is going to be hard without participants. Oh, here's a part. It's only me though. But you would go to more and you would hit rename myself. So instead of being Sinead today, I can be Nick Ragusano if I wanted to. I could be Nick R. So that's something, I'm not going to remember that for future meetings because that could be confusing for others when I log on. So you can rename yourself. The other thing you can do in Meets is that for one of the security things is you can make it so that people can't share their screen, which is probably a good practice, is having that turned off for most of the time. But if you wanted a specific student to share their screen, you could always click that more button. And I don't have any other participants, but if you click that more button, usually it'll allow you to make somebody else the host. So if you want,
where's the more button? It's under participants.
Yeah. So to get to the more button, you have to click participants. And then is it showing up? And then in the upper right hand side, there's like a column that shows up on the right side, and you get a list of names. And then if you scroll up,
so if you just hover over your name in the participants, that's where you would rename. And
yeah, there's like a more thing. Mm-hmm. And it also, like Meet, allows you, if kids come in and you hear noises, you can always go over to participants and you can see who's muted or not muted more easily. I'm not sure how big the icons are for you, but right now you could tell that my microphone is off on Zoom, and you could see more easily if somebody's mic is on and shouldn't be. You know, if you hear a bunch of like pots and pans in the background and video games and such, you can always just go in and manually mute any class or any student that is kind of noisy.
And then Sinead, Christy had a good question. So like Eric Kantak has that Zoom meeting that's standing. So if she was subbing in his class and clicked on that Zoom meeting, would that be sufficient, and would she be the host?
Yes, so that's a nice workaround. So you could always use that. You would just need to communicate it with the students that you need to click the Meet link inside the Google Classroom. And that may be something that we encourage teachers to do as part of their sub plans. And if a teacher knows they're going to be out, they could front load that with their students so that they would be aware of that. But absolutely. But right.
And then Daniel wants to know, can a teacher rename a student, because the students might get silly?
Absolutely.
Inappropriate.
You could definitely rename a student because, you know, I've had kids ask me to call them like hot buns over the years. And if you know, they're going to do that stuff because they're kids. But another thing you could do is like with host controls before it even starts, you can check this off so that they can't rename themselves. So unless they ask, so you can take that permission away from them. But that is a good point because we know, Daniel, that they will do it. If there's a way to be silly and a little naughty, there'll be a handful that will do it every single time. Another thing you can do is take away their permission to unmute themselves. So you can, in Zoom, this is one of the nice features. You can take away the unmute themselves. So then only you can unmute students, and that gives you a little bit more control. So that's one of the nice things about Zoom. A couple other things that Zoom lets you do, and I won't go through all of them because they're really things that if you wanted to change your background, start video, you can choose a virtual background if you're on a device that allows you to do that. Most of mine don't. So if I wanted to pretend to be in San Francisco or, you know, on this beach somewhere, you can do that in Zoom. You can't quite do that as easily in Meets. Then they also have, just like in Meet, the sharing screens. So this gives you like, which screen do you want to share? Now this is probably one of the trickiest things, and I would recommend going in and playing around, opening up your free account and playing, is because in the beginning, I would always inevitably share the wrong screen. They give me all these options and I'd pick the wrong one. So it would be something to go in, just ask a friend to kind of be on the other side, invite them to your Zoom meeting, and then practice sharing your screen so you get the hang of which of these is actually the one you want to share. Another thing, this is also true with Meets, I didn't highlight it, but if you have a student that requires it, you can also use closed captioning. Meet has this as well, which is really nice. It gets about 80% of what you say correct. Spelling, not always. Like if you say meet and in a Google Meet, it always acts as if you're like talking about like meat from like an animal. But that kind of stuff is helpful, but you know, but also it's kind of funny too. And then Zoom has breakout rooms, which as a sub, if a teacher asks you to use those, hopefully they give you clear directions on how to do that. Meet has this feature as well now, but it requires an extension. And again, if you're asked to use that, hopefully your teachers will explain that to you. Now, this is the reason these reactions right here and these emojis over here, in my opinion, are the real reasons many teachers prefer Zooms to Meet. Because as Martin said, engagement is a huge issue. I'd say particularly at the secondary level, especially when all of their cameras are off and it's really hard to know who's actually sitting at the computer following along with you and who's not. What's really nice in Zoom, you can say, everyone, give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go to the next thing. And if you have the participant list, they can go to more, give you a thumbs up, and it gives you a whole list. You could also say, okay, let me know, am I going too fast or do I need to go slower? And they can give you these icons. They can give you yeses and nos. And it's just a nice way to kind of check that they're still engaged, even if you can't see them. And this, to me, is probably the biggest benefit of Zoom, especially at the secondary level. You could also do that with the reactions. The difference with the reactions, it's not really showing us here because, there it goes. These pop up on their square. So, you know, if they want to give somebody praise, like a virtual clap or a thumbs up, this is a quick way. Teacher, give me a thumbs up if you're ready to move on, or give me a clap if, you know, you agreed or disagreed, or however you want to use it. So that way you really can kind of see if people are following along. Now, for example, say you had your whole class give you a, you know, thumbs up or thumbs down, and then you're done and you want to erase all of them, you can just hit clear all, and then it wipes it clean. So that's one way you can use Zoom. Hopefully Meets will get competitive and add this feature to its platform as well, because I think this really does help you kind of know who's paying attention and who's like taking a bath or something while they're supposed to be Zooming. Any questions about Zoom at this point?
This is just a general question. So the students have the option of not being visible in the camera.
Right. Right now there is, that's, you know, one of those debated questions among all educators is like, can we force students to have their cameras on? And so that's going to kind of, I think right now the decision is like, we can't force them to have it on because we don't know exactly what situation they're in. So we have to err on the side of being maybe more compassionate than maybe they all deserve. But for the few that do need that compassion, we have to give it to them. And so that would be the case. Now, I think with this new blur technology, with being able to blur the background, and once we get to the point where we're able to do a virtual background for all students, then we'll be able to say you have to have your cameras on. But until we can get that, so not everybody is able to look into each other's homes, we probably can't require that yet. Yeah, any other questions? I know that's like drinking from a fire hose. I apologize. And like I said, the best way to learn these tools is just to go in and play around. Make rope in spouses and children. And then I think we're nearly done.
We're nearly done. We're on the tail end here. You want to see? So we're going to go to Clever.
Where did it go? There we are.
There we go. So I just wanted to briefly show you what Clever looked like and talk to you a moment about Clever. This is something new that other districts have been using it for a while. This is new for our district this year. We just started. Clever is a place that you go to, a platform you go to that uses single sign-on for all the platforms the students would need. Because, you know, we found in the springtime when we moved quickly to distance learning, it was so confusing for parents to keep track of all of the usernames and passwords and all of the different places that kids were going. So Clever is kind of the little box that holds all of those. So all of our students have a Clever account. They use their district email and password, their Google email and password. And you won't automatically have one because these sync with Aries. So that the teacher is in there, Aries kind of kisses with Clever at night, and the classes are there and loaded, and then the teacher adds the different platforms that they want the students to have in there. However, I can add you if you're going to be doing a long-term sub or you need to be in Clever. I just wanted you to be aware of it. I can add you as a custom staff member into Clever so that you would have access and see what the kids have. So on the kids' Chromebooks, if you notice at the top, do you want to share that screen and we'll show?
This is what it looks like if you're helping students. So I logged into my son's.
Not sharing the screen yet.
Oh, sorry. Oops.
That's okay.
It's almost as good as talking while muted. So I'll log in. I logged into my son's account just so you can see what it looks like, because this is how some students are accessing all of their.
So notice at the top bar there's that C for Clever. So on the Chromebooks, Clever has been pinned to all the Chromebooks so the students know they can go right into that, into Clever through there. It's also in the Google Classroom. So they're just going to go into it. It remembers who they are. And right away, we're at the portal. And these are all of, you can see them. So these are all the apps that Sinead and I added because we are the district admin for Clever. So you're going to see the entire Google suite there. So when Sinead said the kids need to go to their meet and get their schedule there, usually they'll go in through Clever. They'll go into Clever, click on the meet. That's another way. Or they could go just to Google and use the waffle. So it's up to the kids. But then these are all the platforms that we use for curriculum. So if you're an elementary classroom and they need to go into Benchmark, you just click on Benchmark. We have the Aries portals linked. We have the McGraw-Hill. We have Britannica. We have FOSS for Science, Mystery Science, MyHRW. So anything the kids might need to go into, Studies Weekly, ProQuest, they just click on that and it remembers them. It's a single sign-on, so there's no need for a username or password. So the problem as a guest teacher, unfortunately, is that you're not linked into all of their classroom accounts. There's really no way to get you into Benchmark, ConnectEd, all of those, unless if you do have a long-term sub situation like Martin had, then we could set you up. But I wanted you just to see it, to be aware of it, because your kids probably will be going into Clever. And it's certainly possible to get you into Clever so you could kind of see what the kids see in terms of what the district apps are.
You mentioned passwords a few moments ago, and that brought up a problem that I'm sure many subs have run into, especially when they're dealing with kindergarten, first and second graders. I forgot my password. Can we remind teachers somehow to have that password list available? Because if we don't know those passwords, we can't help the kids get back in.
Definitely. But Nick, this is why we have Clever, is that hopefully the kids don't need passwords. So if that teacher is using Clever and their kids are using Clever, like Sinead just clicked on the C and we went straight into Ronan's.
This actually was mine because it remembered mine. But if I went into my son's, it looks a lot less cluttered. So I'll see if it'll let me log into his now.
So the nice thing, it doesn't require a username or password. It just remembers them. So this is Ronan's. And if he wants to go into Brain Pop, I don't know if his teacher's used it yet. The first time you use it, you have to sign in, but perfect. And it just takes them in without a username or password.
So now
So hopefully the whole reason we got Clever was kind of so, Nick, to just avoid that situation where you have 20 kids saying, I don't know my username or password, and you're a sub and you can't really help them.
He's never done benchmark online. Oh no, he did. They take a minute. That's the other thing with Clever that I've noticed. I'm not very patient, and so within 5 seconds, I think it's broken.
Yeah.
And then I take 2 more breaths, and then it's on. So you might want to just kind of let them know that I don't know how the technology actually works, but it goes through a couple things before it gets there. So it usually does take about 20 seconds.
But we do have most of the curriculum linked through Clever. So I just wanted you to be aware that if the teacher left something in the Google Classroom where they need to go into Benchmark or go into the My Math book through ConnectEd, the kids are used to it. They know to go to Clever and just click on the icon, and then they'll be in without having to remember a username or password.
And that would be a good thing for us to definitely remind teachers to add to their lesson plans, because some teachers are using this a lot and some teachers aren't using it as much. So they may have their own teacher pages that's even more curated. So it's one of those tools that we started this year to try to eliminate the password issue for parents and for teachers, because you're right, Nick, that is a nightmare.
Yeah. And if you want to open the chat, because I can't. Oops. Okay. So someone said that their kids aren't using it and they would love them to. So it really is that kind of up to the teacher. But Christy, the junior high kids can get in there. You're a long-term sub, so we can set you up with a Clever account and you can get in there with your students. Right? Yeah. Just drop us an email tomorrow and we'll work on getting that set up for you.
Yeah. It was a bit, to be honest, this was like Clever was the roughest. Is that even a word, Linda? Roughest,
the
most rough.
It wasn't very clever.
It was probably the biggest. It was the biggest challenge of the year for Linda and I, because it was a very bumpy road getting things on here. So we're hoping that we made enough mistakes now that when we roll out Clever, next year it'll be super smooth and easy. But
and more people will be using it.
Yeah.
It's a hit and miss. Some teachers love it and some teachers haven't even looked at it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted you to see it in case that comes up. All right, so let's go back to our slideshow.
So can I ask the question?
Absolutely.
So with Clever, is the information gathered when a student logs on to? I used Edpuzzle a lot, and I noticed that platform, was in the Google Suites that you had, within the district, so to speak, right? So when they log into Edpuzzle, does it automatically remember their password and deposit that to Clever?
Yes, correct. So they can, if they go, they have to sign in one time. So if they go into Clever, click on Edpuzzle.
They have to sign into Clever first and then Edpuzzle or Benchmark or whatever?
Correct. They could go straight to Edpuzzle if the teacher's not using Clever. But some of our programs like Studies Weekly for the elementary, you can only access it through Clever. So Edpuzzle is one where if you don't use Clever, or if that teacher doesn't use Clever, they can go to Edpuzzle and log on through there. But they do have the option of doing it through Clever. So they would log into Clever.
Let me just kind of like think about this a bit, if I may. So if I'm teaching a second grade class and I want to introduce my students to a new platform, do I need to get them to bring up Google Classroom, and then each of them logs into this platform from Google Classroom using their ACUSD email, and then that logs into Clever?
No. Well, first of all, as a guest teacher, unless you're long-term, you would not be introducing the kids to a new platform.
Okay, well, I got it. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, I'm just trying to, have a basic understanding of the background. Yeah, so.
If you're in a long-term situation and you want your kids to start using Edpuzzle, it just depends. If you're using Clever, they would log into Clever, they would click on Edpuzzle, and that would prompt them to use their Google password. So they would have to sign into Edpuzzle one time, and then forevermore it will remember them, and they won't have to do it again.
Right.
So that's the benefit of Clever, and that's the beauty of Clever. Whereas if they're just going into Edpuzzle to Edpuzzle, they'll have to log in every time to remember their password.
Right. So Clever, I see Daniel's comment. You do not need to go through Clever at all to access Google Classroom. Clever is just basically a place to put all of the apps a teacher may use, and that saves all their passwords so that if they're going to the app, so they wouldn't have access to anything that you wouldn't have access to other than just like the reading materials. And I would assume that if a teacher was had something specific, they would give you the login information to go into that app as well.
Right. And then,
So let me ask you this. So if I'm walking into a classroom and I'm there for a day, not long term, just there for a day, and the teacher, for whatever reason, says, the lesson today is in Benchmark, and they haven't used Clever per se. Is there a way to get our kids into Benchmark?
Yeah, your students would still be able to get into Benchmark. So they would be on their Chromebook. If they're logged in, they would be able to click in. Now for you to get into Benchmark, that would be a little tricky online. If you're in the hybrid, hopefully they'd still have the teacher's manuals and things there for you. If you're doing distance learning, they may have to share some login information with you, that's something we definitely need to include in the plans.
Yeah, teachers have their own account and their own login specific. However, in distance learning, I would say the majority of teachers using Benchmark aren't using Benchmark Universe because we have all of this technology. The kids, they're sending packets home, so the kids have their workbook or the little magazine for the week, and you have that, and you can go over it through a Google Meet. So. You're not, as a guest teacher, you're not going to introduce anything new technology-wise to the kids that they haven't already been using. Yeah. And the teachers hopefully will leave you detailed information of what technology. I just wanted to show you Clever in case it came up and you said, what is it? Because the younger kids do sign into Google Classroom through Clever. And it doesn't matter for you. You don't need to be into Clever you can use the Waffle and get into Google Classroom. It's just they have that option. They can either go through the Waffle or they can go through Clever. It's either way. But I just wanted to show you.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, we ask our kids how to, to teach us how to, teach them.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of how I always do with technology. Yeah. I learned from our kids.
I've been there. I trust me. I've been there. So anyway, I'll turn my mic off and stop now. Thank you.
I always have to ask my daughters are young adults, and I'm like, can you show me how to do this? Because I don't know. So just as we finish up, I just wanted to show you some other resources that you have available to you that they're linked in the agenda, but I wanted to show them here. They're also in the slide deck. Sinead and I communicate weekly with all of our teachers. And so we have created these, an elementary digital resource guide and a secondary digital resource guide. And we update it, you know, every week if need be with new professional development opportunities, or, you know, every other week. And it's a living document, and you would have access to look at this, but we have pretty much anything you need. We have the links to taking that mandated training of Get Safety Train. We have links to all the professional development. So all year long, teachers have been doing and recording little Zoom meetings or Google Meets on, you know, how to use Aries, how to use Google Classroom. You know, this is new for all of us. So if you go to our pre-recorded professional learning resources.
So this may be, I mean, it's great that we have it. It's also kind of horrifying, but because a lot of these are videos of us when we were just practicing. So a lot of, you know, you had questions about Aries, Martin, and I'll show you some places where we've, you know, kind of captured all of these for you. So now as subs, it used to, the way our sort of Google Suite works is that the only people who can access our like shared ACUSD materials are people with ACUSD email addresses. So now that you have or will have an ACUSD email address, you'll be able to access all of these resources as well. So for example, for professional development, you had mentioned Aries and how to use Aries. So if you find yourself in a long-term sub situation, we have a recorded Aries training from earlier this year. You could go in and watch. We have trainings on using platforms like Illuminate or Jamboard. And like I said, these are this particular resource is all of our in-house.
We even have the recording on how to use this resource document.
Yes, this is the recording on how to use the resource document. And so because we're all learning these skills and we're not professional, you know, it makes you all feel better as you watch it, because, you know, the first couple of minutes we're like scratching our heads and like figuring it out, but then it starts. So those are the in-house ones. And then we also have a lot of great resources linked that have been shared from more professional, polished organizations that you can look at. So for example, Region 6, which is like Stanislaus, San Joaquin, we're part of that region. They have created some PD webinars that you can go back and watch that can help you, you know, if you're really interested in using Edpuzzle or HyperDocs. If you find yourself in a long-term position, you can go back and watch these pre-recorded. But one of the things that this tool right here, the teacher and parent tutorials.
Oh, this is the best. SCOE put Sacramento County Office of Ed sent this to us, so we stole it right away and put it out there, because these are all links to short videos that you could watch. So if you know you want to do a Jamboard and you've never done it, you have all these different videos that you could watch, or or if you wanted to know more about Google Classroom. So all of these are links to short videos or documents about these things. So we just wanted to show you that now as a guest teacher, we'll have a district email. You have access to all the resources that teachers have, and we want to fully include you in all of our staff development and professional development. So we want you to feel comfortable using these resources, reaching out to us if you need something. These documents also are specific to subject matter. So the elementary one goes into, has all of the things, but if you're a secondary teacher and you're going to be subbing in a math class, you might want to go to that secondary math document. And then this is going to show you all of the district adopted curriculum at the secondary level, and with the links to learn a little bit about it.
Right. So then it's all, and we're always resources. We ourselves are resources if you ever get stuck with it, especially a curriculum question or an instruction question. Linda specializes more in elementary. I'm more so in secondary. But I realized we didn't include our email addresses in this
Yeah.
presentation, but we'll send those to all of you because
I'll pop them in the chat right
yeah,
now.
we can always reach out to us, because if we don't have the answer, we are good at, putting you in the direction of somebody who does have the answer. And then Linda mentioned that she has the elementary resource document as well. And it's it's organized a little differently. It's essentially the same, but it's more specific to how elementary is organized. So those are good to reference. And when you ever have some free time, you can get lost in them and poke around and hopefully find some good stuff in there. We try to keep them as updated as we can.
And we don't want to go into the weeds with all of this, because this would be another hour of training to do it. So it's just know that it's there. It's there for you to play with. Mm-hmm. We also have that we linked in the agenda a bunch of quick start guides, because we went over things kind of quickly today. So there's a Zoom quick start guide, there's a Google Meet quick start guide, there's a Google Classroom quick start. So things that you could print out. It's just like a little how-to that's available for you. And then one thing we hadn't really talked about, and it's not in the handbook, but it is on the district website, is the evaluation process. So first of all, we have staff development there. So that's why we want to know that you have access to, so this will take you to all the documents and you could look at them. But you have access to all of our staff development and professional development videos, and we welcome you and encourage you to watch them. And then as a guest teacher, we do have evaluation forms. I don't think I was ever asked as a teacher to fill one out, but sometimes a teacher might fill one out, and you have the right as a guest teacher to see what the teacher wrote and address that. But you certainly have, you can ask to to leave an evaluation of what you experienced as a guest teacher. So, you might walk in a classroom with no sub-plans and no prep, and that wasn't fair to you, and you want to write down and and submit that. Or you might have the teacher who left you 20 pages of very detailed plans, and it was a lovely day and the class was lovely, and you want to write that down. So we just wanted to share the link for you to get your evaluation form for you to fill out if you'd like to fill out an evaluation of how your day went, and show you that the teachers also have the option to fill out a form, and you have the right to view that.
That's that. And then lastly,
and someone asked if we'll be sending out the slide deck. Yes. So it's going to take a while for this Meet to download. So we'll send the recording and the slide deck out tomorrow for everyone, so that you have access to all of these things.
Absolutely. And then lastly, this will kind of be one of the last things we do. We've been talking about how we really want to work with our sites and our teachers to really, really standardize the lesson plans, to make sure that they have really set you up for success in terms of explaining the technology and the attendance procedures adequately. So we would like some feedback from you about things you want us to make sure we include in these templates that we may not have thought of. And so the way we're going to do that is with a quick Jamboard. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever used a Jamboard before. Oh, okay. This is like, I mean, I am going to go back into a classroom just so I can do Jamboard every day, because it's my favorite thing. And we don't have enough time to play with it. But so I'm going to drop this in the chat. All right. So once I put the link in the chat, if you could all click on it. I'm going to drop this in the chat too. All right, I see a bunch of you are in there up at the top. Now, the nice thing about Jamboard, I mean, I could spend like another 3 hours talking about Jamboard, but we'll just do a really quick activity. So I want you to add some things that you want to include, that you definitely want included in substitute plans. Now, the way you're going to add to it, there's a toolbar here, And I think the easiest way to have everyone do it, we don't have time to play with all the tools, is to come over here and click a sticky note. And on that sticky note, you can write everything on one sticky note, or you can create multiple sticky notes. But perhaps one thing you want in the sub-plans is attendance procedures.
You can choose the color of your sticky
Yes,
note
and
too.
if you're not a yellow person, by all means, go blue. Hit save. And then what you'll notice is that they kind of stack on top of each other. If you want, you can kind of resize them, but we don't need to do that. So if everyone could take a few minutes to write down things, and then we'll make sure to have these included in our template.
I like the gumdrops.
I like that one too. Licorice flavored, of course.
Yeah, I think specific directions for every link. That it's so, it's taken Sinead a long time to learn a lot of this technology, and it's overwhelming. And we certainly hope we didn't overwhelm you today. I know we presented a lot of things, so just know that we are here as a resource to help you.
Massage chairs.
Access to the link was denied. Oh, maybe because.
Oh, that's probably had to load app, not on it. It might be because if you join this from your personal email and not an ACUSD account, you probably can't get onto the Jamboard. Yeah, you definitely need to have an ACUSD account to do that. Yes. So the next, I didn't even consider that to use anything on our Google Suite, but once all of you have,
you can submit a request, and Sinead later after the meeting can open it and you can add to the Jamboard.
And
so, because this Jamboard is live, so we can, it'll send that request to your email for you to join, and we'll get that in.
Absolutely. So, and it also, the link will be in the slide deck that we send out.
Well, I bet the same thing will happen with the survey.
Absolutely.
So we'll stay with our emails and click yes to all the requests.
All right. So I'll leave this open, and then you guys, like I said, we can keep adding to it, and we'll, be over the next week or so, just trying to get that template firmed up and filled out so that we're ready to go November 16th for those of you who will be subbing during the hybrid situation. Now, the last thing before we go is, where right there. I'm getting lost in my tabs. All right. As we, like we said, this is our very, very first guest teacher oriented, what do you call it? Copy and paste first. Is our very first guest teacher orientation. And so we know that there's room for improvement. So we have a really quick Google form. And when I say quick, it could take you 30 seconds. But if you're an overachiever, it might even take you 2 minutes. It's just a couple of questions to get your feedback on what you would like in a future guest teacher orientation so we can improve things. I've dropped the link in the chat, and it'll also be sent out in an email. But if you have a few minutes or seconds before you leave today, we'd appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, and we just want to thank you so much for taking the time to come. I know it was a long training and we threw a lot at you, but we so appreciate you willing to guest teach in this environment and to try something new and go outside your comfort zone. Just know that you have a lot of support here. That's our job. We're teachers on special assignment here. So our job is to support the teachers, whether you're a guest teacher or regular teacher. So we are your lifeline, your support system. So don't hesitate to contact us.
All right. Thank you. Any questions? We thought we were going to have you out of here by like 3:30, 4 o'clock tops.
But we like to talk.
Yes, but you don't give either of us a microphone. It's
Yeah.
always a bad.
That's the problem when Sean put us in an office together. Too much fun. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, ladies. Have a great day.
You guys are awesome. This is great. I really appreciate it.
Thanks all.
Thank you everyone for everything. It's going wonderful.
Hey, Eileen, it's good to see you again.
Hi.
Thank you.